All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going to get right into something that is absolutely transforming our digital world, but it's happening almost completely behind the scenes. We're talking about the monumental race to secure our 5G networks. And yeah, I mean, the very foundation of, well, pretty much everything in our connected future. But here's the twist. The threat we're defending against is a ghost. It's a type of supercomputer, a quantum computer, that doesn't even fully exist in its final powerful form yet. So how do you build a shield for a sword that's still being forged? This is so much more than a simple software patch. It's a complete teardown and rebuilding of what digital trust even means. We're going to connect all the dots for you, from the nature of the threat itself, all the way to the detailed blueprint for our defense. Let's dive in.
Okay, let's start with the punchline, because this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of the urgency. The phrase is, harvest now, decrypt later. And what that means is that this isn't some distant academic problem for our kids to worry about. It's happening right now, today, as you're listening to this. Imagine the sheer flood of data flowing through the world's networks every single second. We're talking about top-level state secrets, sensitive military communications, the corporate R&D that will define a company's next 20 years. And on a personal level, your private financial data, your health records, your private conversations, all of that is wrapped in layers of encryption we've been taught to trust. But right now, hostile nations and sophisticated cybercriminals are just sucking it all up. They're not even trying to read it. They don't have to. They are meticulously copying and stockpiling it in giant, ever-growing data archives. They're playing the long game, just waiting for the day they finally get their hands on the key. And that key, that's a powerful quantum computer. The moment it arrives, every secret harvested today becomes an open book. This is the ticking time bomb that has security experts all over the world in a dead sprint.
So that brings us to the fundamental conflict of this entire story. Think of it like building castles. For the last few decades, we've had what we call classical security. Our digital castles have been protected by a very specific kind of lock. It's a mathematical lock based on problems that are incredibly hard for our current computers to solve. Things like taking a massive number and trying to figure out which two prime numbers were multiplied to create it. For a normal computer, even a giant supercomputer, picking that lock would take billions of years. It's been a fantastic lock. But here's the problem. A quantum computer isn't just a faster version of what we have. It's a totally different kind of machine. It thinks differently. And it just so happens that this new quantum way of thinking is perfectly suited to picking our exact type of mathematical lock. It makes it trivial. So what do? You can't just make the old lock bigger. You have to invent an entirely new kind of lock, one that's designed from the ground up to resist this new kind of thinking. And that's our goal, quantum-safe security. It's a whole new foundation built on bizarre and wonderful new math problems that we believe are impossibly hard for both classical computers and the coming quantum computers to solve. This whole explainer is about that monumental journey, this global project to swap out all the old, vulnerable locks for these new, resilient ones.
So here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to dig a lot deeper into what this quantum crisis really looks like. Then we need to understand the battlefield, so we're going to deconstruct exactly what 5G and this new thing called ORAN are. After that, we'll get into the cool stuff, the new weapons in our security arsenal called PQC and QKD. Then we'll put it all together and show you the blueprint for a quantum secure network. And of course, we'll have to see who's actually out there building this stuff, so we'll look at the real-world pioneers. And finally, we'll take a sober look at the long road ahead, because this journey is, well, it's not going to be easy. Okay, Section 1, a quantum security crisis. Look, before we can really appreciate the cleverness of the defense, we have to have a very clear picture of the attack. And I want to be clear, this is not science fiction. This is a very real, very concrete threat to the digital plumbing that our entire modern society depends on. Let's just state the problem as plainly as we possibly can. The security of almost the entire modern internet rests on a concept called public key cryptography. You might have seen the acronyms for the most common algorithms, RSA and ECC, which stands for elliptic curve cryptography. These are the workhorses that create that little padlock icon in your browser's address bar. They secure basically everything. And their security rests on a beautifully simple idea. They use math that's super easy to do in one direction, but practically impossible to reverse if you're a regular computer. But here's the rub. For a quantum computer, that impossibility just dissolves. It's not hard anymore. Which means the very foundation of digital trust that we've built over the last 30 years is poised to just crumble.
And this isn't just some vague, hand-wavy fear. The specific cryptographic missile aimed right at the heart of our current security actually has a name. It's called Shor's algorithm. A mathematician named Peter Shor came up with it all the way back in 1994. It's a recipe, an algorithm that's specifically designed to be run on a quantum computer to do one thing really, really well: find the prime factors of enormous numbers. Now, why on earth does that matter? Well, because the entire security of the most widely used encryption scheme, RSA, is based on the fact that that exact task is supposed to be impossibly hard. To break it, you need to find the two secret prime numbers that were multiplied together to create the public key. A classical supercomputer would literally need longer than the age of the universe to do that for the keys we use today. A future quantum computer running Shor's algorithm, it might do it in a matter of hours. It is, for all intents and purposes, a skeleton key for virtually every digital lock we currently use.
So you might be asking, okay, but how soon do I need to worry? Well, this is a fascinating little formula that helps answer that very question. It's called the Mosca model, named after the cryptographer Michel Mosca, and it's a brilliantly simple way to see if you're already behind schedule. So X is how long you need your data to stay secret. Think of it as the data's shelf life. Y is how long it's going to take you to switch over all your systems to new quantum-safe ones. And Z is the time until a powerful quantum computer actually exists. The formula is simple. If X plus Y is greater than Z, you're already in trouble. Let's make it real. Say you're a government agency, and your classified intelligence needs to stay secret for 50 years. That's X. Now, upgrading your entire global communications network is a massive job. Let's be optimistic and say it takes 15 years. That's Y. So X plus Y is 65. Now, what if the experts are right and a powerful quantum computer, or Z, arrives in, say, 20 years? Well, 65 is a lot bigger than 20. It means that the data being harvested today is already vulnerable because its security will run out long before its secrecy needs to. This simple, terrifying equation is what's lighting a fire under the entire global security community. All right, section 2. Now that we have a healthy respect for the threat, we need to map out the territory we have to defend. And this is really important because a 5G network, especially with this new O-RAN or Open RAN philosophy, is a completely different beast than the 4G networks we're used to. It's way more complex, way more distributed. So to secure it, we have to start with a really detailed map of all the pieces and how they're connected.
The one word you have to understand here is disaggregation. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the concept is simple. In the old world of 4G, a cell tower's base station was basically one big proprietary box. You bought the whole thing from one company, like an Ericsson or a Nokia. O-RAN comes along and smashes that box open. It breaks it up into smaller, modular pieces. It separates the hardware from the software, and most importantly, it creates open, standardized connections, or interfaces, between all those pieces. Now, for business, this is amazing. It means a mobile operator can buy the best radio part from vendor A and run it with the best software from vendor B. It drives innovation and lowers costs. But from a security point of view, every single one of those new open connections is a new door that an attacker could try to break down. It dramatically increases the surface area we have to defend.
Okay, all these new components have a lot of confusing acronyms, so let's use this fantastic analogy of a school campus to make sense of it all. Your phone, the user equipment, or UE, that's a student. The radio part at the tower, the ORU, that's like the classroom's speakers and microphones. It just deals with the raw radio signals. The ODU, or distributed unit, is the homeroom teacher. It's close to the student and handles all the immediate real-time tasks that need super fast reflexes. Moving away from the tower, you get the central unit, the OCU, which is split in two. The control part, the CUCP, is like the dean's office. It manages who gets to connect to the network, the admissions process. The user part, the CUUP, is the school's mailroom or data shipping center. Its job is to take all the student data and route it out to the big wide internet. But then you have the really new, powerful parts, the brains. The near real-time RIC is the academic affairs office, constantly analyzing things and making rapid-fire optimizations. The SMO and non-real-time RIC, that's the principal's office. It's in charge of the big picture, long-term management and school policies. And finally, the 5G core is the entire school district headquarters, connecting our campus to all the other schools in the rest of the world. Each of these parts has a totally different job, and as we'll see, that means they have totally different security needs.
Now, flying between all these buildings on our school campus are different kinds of messages. We call these planes. The most obvious one is the U plane, the user plane. That's the students' actual stuff, the content, the videos they're watching, the messages they're sending. Then you have the C plane, the control plane. These are the administrative signals. This is the dean's office telling a student which classroom to go to, or the network setting up and tearing down a connection. It controls the flow. Finally, you have the M plane, the management plane. This is the principal's office sending out new school-wide policies to the teachers, or IT staff configuring and monitoring the equipment. Now, protecting the user plane data is obviously critical. But think about it. If an attacker could take over the control or management planes, they could create absolute chaos. They could disconnect everyone, reroute traffic, or even shut the whole school down.
So this brings us to the actual connections, the pathways between the school buildings. In those super detailed network diagrams, you'll see two main flavors. First, you have the traditional interfaces defined by the main standards group, 3GPP. These are the established links, like the one between the teacher, the DU, and the dean's office, the CU. But ORAN introduced a whole new set of open interfaces. These are the ones that break open that proprietary box. The most famous one is the front hall, connecting the radio to the teacher. Then you have the connections to the brain, the RICs. The key takeaway here is simple. Every single line, whether it's an old one or a new ORAN one, is a potential pathway for an attack. ORAN's openness is a huge benefit, but it also means we have more doors and windows we need to lock down. Our quantum-safe plan has to cover every single one. Section 3. The PQC and QKD arsenal. Okay, we've mapped the battlefield, we know all the buildings and all the pathways on our campus. Now it's time to check out the armory. What are the new weapons we're forging to defend this new open world? There are two main families of tools being developed, and they couldn't be more different from each other. One is based on pure math, and the other is based on pure physics. First up, we have post-quantum cryptography, or PQC. You can think of this as the next generation of what we already do. It's a whole new suite of encryption algorithms, but instead of being based on that factoring problem that Shor's algorithm can break, they're based on completely different, much gnarlier mathematical puzzles. We're talking about things with names like lattice-based cryptography, code-based cryptography, really complex stuff. And the whole point is that these new problems are believed to be incredibly hard for any kind of computer to solve, our current ones and the future quantum ones. The huge, massive advantage of PQC is how you deploy it. It's just software. It can be rolled out through a firmware update or software patch on our existing network gear, which makes it way, way cheaper and easier to deploy across the globe. This is the stuff that NIST, the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, has been working furiously to standardize. Our second weapon is from a different universe entirely. It's called quantum key distribution, or QKD. And this approach doesn't get its security from a math problem being hard. It gets its security from the fundamental laws of physics, specifically quantum physics. The idea is to send a secret key from one place to another by encoding it onto single particles of light, photons, and sending them over a special fiber optic cable. And here's the magic trick. Because of the weird rules of quantum mechanics, if a spy tries to intercept and measure those photons to steal the key, the very act of looking at them disturbs them. It changes them. This creates errors that the two legitimate users can see immediately. They know someone is listening in, so they just throw that key away and generate a new one. In theory, it provides perfect, unconditional security guaranteed by physics itself. What's the catch? Well, it requires brand new, expensive, dedicated hardware, and it has limitations on how far you can send the signal. Now there's a third, unsung hero in our arsenal that makes everything else stronger. It's the quantum random number generator, or QRNG. See, all cryptography, old and new, is built on a foundation of randomness. If the numbers you use to create your secret keys aren't truly random, if they have some hidden pattern, an attacker can potentially guess them, and your whole security collapses. Normal computers don't create true randomness. They create pseudo-random numbers using clever math, but ultimately, it's a predictable process. A QRNG, on the other hand, taps into the inherent provable randomness of the universe at the quantum level, like whether a single photon will pass through a semi-transparent mirror or bounce off. It produces numbers that are fundamentally, physically unpredictable. Using a QRNG to create the seeds for our keys, whether they're for old-school encryption or new PQC algorithms, is like building our security castle on a foundation of solid bedrock instead of unpredictable sand.
So let's put our two main weapons, PQC and QKD, side by side, because this comparison is everything. It explains all the strategic decisions that network architects are making right now. First, the core principle. PQC is security based on math. QKD is security based on physics. That's a huge difference. Next, implementation. PQC is a software upgrade. You can push it out to existing gear. QKD requires all new hardware and dedicated fiber. Huge implications for deployment. How about latency? PQC adds a bit of a delay during the initial handshake when keys are being exchanged. QKD, once it's up and running, can spit out new, fresh keys with almost no latency. And cost? This is a big one. PQC is relatively cheap to deploy. QKD, with all that new hardware, is significantly more expensive. And finally, maturity. PQC algorithms are now standardized by NIST and are ready for primetime software integration. QKD technology is very mature in certain high-security niche areas, but standardizing it for broad network use is still a work in progress. So what's the takeaway? It's not PQC or QKD. The smart strategy is PQC and QKD, using each one where its specific strengths make the most sense.
Section 4, the Quantum Secure Network Blueprint. And here we are. This is the heart of it all. We understand the threat, we've mapped our school campus, and we've inspected the weapons in our armory. Now, let's bring it all together. Let's walk through the network connection by connection and see exactly how we apply these new tools to build a fortress.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty of securing the connections, it's really important to remember one thing. In a 5G network, your actual data, the photos, the messages, it gets a layer of encryption at a protocol level called PDCP before it even really starts its journey. This is fantastic. It's end-to-end encryption for the content, so even if someone could tap into a wire somewhere, the data itself is still scrambled. What we're about to talk about is adding a vital second layer of armor. We're now going to secure the transport channels themselves. This protects the integrity of the whole pathway, and crucially, it also protects all that control and management traffic that's flying around. It's what we call defense in depth, multiple layers of security.
Okay, let's start with one of the most sensitive new links, the front haul. That's the super high-speed connection between the radio antenna, RORU, and the homeroom teacher, RODU. How do we lock this down? The blueprint uses a combination of tools. First, to protect the actual data flowing over the fiber, we use a protocol called MACsec. Think of it as putting a powerful, high-speed lock right on the physical cable itself. But before that lock can work, the radio and the teacher need to prove their identities to each other. Are you who you say you are? That authentication process needs to be quantum safe, so we use an upgraded protocol, a post-quantum version of EAP-TLS. And finally, all the management chatter that goes on over that link is also locked down, using a post-quantum version of mutual TLS with keys that are born from a QRNG to be as strong as possible.
Okay, moving deeper into the network, we have the mid-haul. That's the F1 connection from the teacher, DU, to the dean's office, CU, and then the backhaul, the N2 and N3 connections from the dean's office out to the school district, the 5G core. For these pathways, which can cross over untrusted networks, the blueprint calls for what is basically a quantum-resistant VPN. It wraps all the traffic in a secure tunnel using protocols like post-quantum IPsec or post-quantum DTLS. This protects absolutely everything flowing between these critical network functions at the network layer, and once again, the foundation for all this security is built on those truly random keys generated by a QRNG.
Now what about the brain, the intelligent control system? An attacker's dream would be to take this over. So every command, from big picture policy changes to split-second optimizations, has to be armored. The management commands coming from the principal's office down to the network equipment, that's the O1 interface, are secured with post-quantum mutual TLS. The policy updates sent from the long-term brain to the short-term brain, the A1 interface, also get PQMTLS. This ensures only authorized managers can change how the network behaves. And for those critical, super fast control commands from the near RT RIC down to the base stations, the E2 interface, we use that robust VPN tunnel approach with PQ IPsec. The entire command and control structure is hardened against a quantum-era attack. Now, this is where it gets really, really smart. This slide shows the deep thinking behind why different connections get different security solutions. It's not random, it's tailored. Take the O1 and O2 management interfaces. Yes, the information is important, but these are not processes that happen in a microsecond. If the PQC handshake adds a few extra milliseconds of delay, it's not a big deal. So the flexibility and lower cost of a PQC software solution is a perfect logical fit. But now contrast that with the E2 interface. This is the near real-time control loop for the radio. It's making adjustments on a millisecond timescale. Here, every fraction of a second is precious. This is the perfect use case for QKD. For a static, point-to-point link like this that needs ultra-low latency, you can install a QKD system to provide a constant, high-speed stream of fresh, physically secure keys. You then feed those keys into a very fast encryption protocol like MACsec. It's a high-performance solution for high-performance problem. This is a brilliant example of using the right tool for the right job. So, does all this theory actually work? Let's walk through an attack. Here's a classic one. An attacker tries to set up a rogue base station. In step 1, they broadcast a signal that spoofs the idea of a real, legitimate base station nearby. They send a connection request to the core network. In a vulnerable system, the network might get tricked. It thinks the real base station just dropped and reconnected, so it drops the legitimate users and connects them to the fake one. It's a classic denial of service attack. But now, let's look at our defense. In our new secured network, before any connection is made, a post-quantum mutual TLS handshake is absolutely mandatory. The attacker's rogue station, by definition, cannot have the valid long-term PQC private key and the certificate that goes with it. The handshake fails instantly. The attack is stopped dead in its tracks. The door never even opens. Okay, here's another one that's all about your personal privacy, the IMS catcher, sometimes called a stingray. These are devices that law enforcement or attackers can use to trick your phone into revealing its permanent identity. It's soupy, which can then be used to track you. 5G has a built-in protection where it encrypts that permanent identity into a temporary one called a SUSI. But if that encryption is the old, classical kind, a future quantum computer could break it and reveal your identity. So what's our defense? Well, in the new blueprint, that SUSI is protected with a powerful post-quantum encryption scheme. So now, the attacker can still intercept that encrypted SUSI, but because it's wrapped in post-quantum protection, they're completely powerless. They can't decrypt it, they can't get to the sensitive permanent identity hidden inside. This is a direct quantum-proof defense for the privacy of every single person on the network. And when you put all these pieces together, you get this amazing before and after picture of the entire 5G core network. The source material calls this the core architecture, or quantumized core. And just look at how systematic the upgrades are. The source of randomness gets an upgrade from a predictable algorithm to a true quantum random number generator. Every internal communication protocol, every digital signature, is ripped out and replaced with its post-quantum equivalent. And while they're at it, they're even boosting the strength of the underlying symmetric encryption from AES 128 to AES 256, just for good measure. This isn't just plugging one or two holes. This is a complete top-to-bottom reinforcement of the network's entire central nervous system. Section 5, Real-World Progress and Pioneers. Okay, so this all sounds incredibly ambitious, and maybe a little bit like a futuristic white paper. But is any of this actually happening in the real world? The answer is a huge, resounding yes. So let's shift gears now from the blueprints on the table to the construction site and look at the amazing progress that's already being made to test and deploy this stuff. This isn't something that just started last year. The momentum has been building. Way back in 2019, SK Telecom in South Korea was already putting quantum random number generators into its live 5G authentication centers to make them stronger. Then, in 2020, Verizon in the US ran the first major trial of QKD on a telecom network, using it to secure live 5G video traffic. That same year, across the pond, British Telecom kicked off a big project called AIQKD to build out quantum-safe 5G test networks. And then a really giant leap forward in 2023, SK Telecom, working with the security company Thales, did the first ever field test of a PQC-secured SIM card on a live commercial 5G network. This timeline shows an incredibly fast progression from lab experiments to live in the wild trials. The future is arriving faster than you think. Now, a massive global upgrade like this can't be a free-for-all. It needs to be a coordinated dance, and that's where the standards bodies come in. This is a team effort. You've got NIST in the United States, which has been running this huge multi-year global competition to pick the best and most secure PQC algorithms for everyone to use. Then you've got 3GPP, the group that literally defines what 5G and 6G are. They're now working to bake these new PQC algorithms right into the core specifications for future network releases. For QKD, you have ETSI in Europe defining the software interfaces so different systems can talk to each other, and the ITUT creating the high-level rulebook for building QKD networks. And of course, the ORAN Alliance itself has dedicated security working groups figuring out the best way to apply all of this within its open architecture. It's this complex global cooperation that's required to make sure the final result is actually secure and works everywhere. And what's fueling all this progress? It's the tools that people can actually get their hands on. You have incredible open source projects like Open Quantum Safe, or OQS. This is a lifesaver for researchers and developers. It gives them a ready-to-use library of PQC algorithms so they can start experimenting and building prototypes without having to reinvent the wheel. Then you have major companies like NVIDIA stepping up, creating special libraries to make these new heavy PQC calculations run lightning fast on their GPUs. On the ORAN side, there's an entire open-source software community building a reference platform so vendors can test out their PQC integrations. And for QKD, commercial companies like ID Quantique and Toshiba are already selling the hardware systems that are being used in all these trials. It's this healthy ecosystem of open-source research and commercial products that's actually making this migration a reality. Section 6, the long road ahead. Okay, we've seen a lot of amazing progress. But it's really important that we end with a balanced, realistic perspective. This transition to a quantum-safe world is arguably one of the biggest and most complex security upgrades in the history of telecommunications. And it is absolutely not going to be a walk in the park. We need to be honest about the very real, very difficult hurdles that are still in our way. This chart does a great job of showing us the three biggest headaches. First, on the far left, QKD deployment costs. That bar is high for a reason. The specialized hardware is still very expensive, and it often requires you to run brand new dedicated fiber optic cables, which is a massive civil engineering project. In the middle, PQC performance overhead. The new PQC algorithms, they have much larger keys and require more number crunching during that initial handshake. That adds latency and chews up processing power, which has to be very carefully managed. And on the right, interoperability risks. That bar is also high. In a world like ORAN, where you want to mix and match equipment from a dozen different vendors, how do you guarantee that a radio from vendor A can successfully establish a PQC-secured connection with a base station from vendor B? It's a huge testing and standards challenge.
And all of those challenges feed into this one giant, overarching question, the migration dilemma. Think about it. We are not building a new internet from scratch on a clean piece of land. We are trying to perform open heart surgery on a patient that is wide awake and running a marathon. The global telecom network is a multi-trillion-dollar system. It's a patchwork quilt of equipment from hundreds of vendors installed over decades. How in the world do you change out the most fundamental security protocols of that entire live system without causing massive outages, without breaking things for people who haven't upgraded yet, and all while still defending against the threats of today? It is an engineering, logistical, and political challenge of almost breathtaking complexity. So what's the answer? What's the master strategy for navigating this minefield? The one term you will hear over and over again from experts is crypto agility. It's a simple but profound idea. It means designing our systems so they are not permanently hard-coded to use only one specific encryption algorithm. A crypto-agile system is flexible. It can be configured to switch between different types of encryption quickly and easily. And this is vital for two reasons. First, it's how you manage the migration. You can build systems that speak both the old classical language and the new post-quantum language at the same time, ensuring a smooth transition. And second, it's our insurance policy for the future. What if 10 years from now, a brilliant mathematician finds a flaw in one of our new PQC algorithms? If our system is crypto-agile, we can just pivot.
We can switch over to a different, stronger algorithm without having to replace the entire network again. Crypto agility is the core architectural principle for surviving this long and uncertain journey. And that brings us to our final question to leave you with. As we've seen, our entire digital world is being methodically rebuilt for the quantum age. We've seen the incredibly detailed blueprints, the international standards bodies working in concert, the careful step-by-step testing. From one angle, it looks like a beautifully planned, careful architectural evolution. And yet, hanging over every single meeting, every single line of code, is that invisible ticking clock of harvest now, decrypt later. And that lends this sense of a frantic, desperate race to the whole endeavor. So what is it? A planned evolution or a frantic race against time? The real answer is, it's both. And that's what makes this one of the most fascinating, complex, and high-stakes technological dramas of our lifetime. A race to rebuild our digital foundation before the quantum earthquake hits and the ground gives way beneath us. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.